cord. All right. Okay. All right, here we have chapter 16, special senses. First, we're going to define something called a sensation. A sensation is defined as the conscious awareness of incoming sensory information. So this is the ones that, this isn't going to be the visceral sensory information coming from your gut. This is going to be something that you're consciously aware of. So if I touch you on your arm, you're consciously aware of it. These stimuli can be detected by receptors all over the body, and we organize them based on if they are general, body-wide receptors, so located on your hands, your arms, your legs, everything, or a specialized receptor that's located only on your head, like your eyes or your ears. Now, with your sensory receptors, you're going to be bringing in information about the external and the internal environment. All of your receptors are able to respond to stimuli. Now, certain receptors are designed to respond to certain stimuli. So your eyes are designed to respond to light energy. Your ears are designed to respond to that incoming sound waves. Now, when the stimuli are coming in to your central nervous system, the ones that are going to be called sensations are those that enter your consciousness. They reach the cerebral cortex. That's that outer layer of gray matter all over the cerebrum. Now, only a small fraction of all of the stimuli coming into your body at all times results in a conscious sensation. A lot of your sensory input goes to other areas of the brain. An example of this is blood pressure signals. Those are going to be relayed to the brainstem. So you're not going to be consciously aware of changes in your blood pressure. You have to use that blood pressure cuff to figure out what it is. Now, those responses that your body is going to make to the signal from about your blood pressure is going to be initiated without any conscious awareness on your part. So that does not count as a sensation. Now, the receptors coming in, they're going to bring information to the CNS about the type of stimulus that's coming in, its location on the body, how intense it is, and the duration. So we can get all of this different information from sensors that basically can just be activated or inactivated, on or off. But we can tell based on how many of them are activated, what part of the body they're activated in, and how long they're activated for, and we can learn a lot about it. Our general senses are going to be what is detected by the simple nervous system structures. These guys are not the complex ones like our eyes or our ears. This is just going to be a receptor telling us where our body is located. It senses pressure. So these receptors are found throughout the body, including our joints and our organs. Now, a good example of this, if you ever want to try it out and see, do my general senses work? Close your eyes, hold your finger out, and touch your nose. That's doable. That's because you have senses in your hand that actually inform you where your muscles are, where your hand is in space, and you, from your knowledge and your memory, can take that to your nose. So we have these general senses that are always present in our body. Now we have both external and internal receptors. External environment might be a pat on the back. Your oxygen levels in your blood might be an internal receptor.
Oh, I joined late. Oh my God.
That's great to have you, Vivian. All right, so our general sense receptors, they are conveying signals to the central nervous system by sensory neurons. Now, the large, what we call the receptive field comes into effect. This is the distribution area of the endings of those sensory neurons. Some, like on your fingers or your hands, have a very small area that is called their receptive field. That way, we can really locate any touch that comes on our hands. Other areas, like your back, have a very large sensory receptive field. So more neurons are going to be, your neuron is going to be covering a much larger area. And there's a few different tests that you can do online to show this, involving starting out by having 2 points, like chopstick points, right next to each other and moving them further apart. What you find is you can detect them as 2 different points, maybe about an inch or less if you're doing it to your fingers. But it could be over an inch, it could be 2 inches, maybe even 3, before you detect them as 2 different points on your back, just because your receptive field is much larger. Some types of receptors that we have are chemoreceptors. These are receptors for chemicals. Nociceptors are receptors for pain. Thermoceptors are receptors for temperature. Mechanoreceptors are receptors for pressure. And photoreceptors are receptors for light. A lot of these you may recognize as we've mentioned them in lab. We have different ones in our skin in that dermis region that are there to detect temperature, pressure, and pain. We're going to see the specialized one like the chemical receptors. Those are used for our nose or for our taste, and photoreceptors are used for our eyes. Now this picture shows us several of the thermoreceptors and mechanoreceptors that we have located in our skin. You remember those, the corpuscles? We have some that have they are called encapsulated because they have a capsule surrounding the nerve endings. That would be like our corpuscle. Tactile corpuscle or our laminated corpuscle, bulbous corpuscle. On the other hand, we also have unencapsulated nerve endings that they just end in the nerves. We're going to see tactile discs are a good example of these. But all of these are in the skin, bringing in information such as pressure, allowing us to tell where you're being touched, with how much force, tell you the duration of it. All that input comes in through those nerve endings. Now, nociceptors are located in your skin as well, and they are bringing in pain information. But there's something interesting that can happen with your nociceptors. If I were to have pain on my fingers or somewhere on my skin, that information, that sensory input would come in up my arm, up to the brachial plexus, to my spinal cord. Now, because sensory input on our nerves is often going to be paired, remember it's like a highway, we bring multiple smaller roads together to form one large one. Because of that, my visceral organs and my skin are going to eventually be using one of the same highways or nerves going back to the spinal cord. Now, if this happens, your nerves can kind of get their wires crossed a little bit. So we may have nociceptor or pain receptors in our skin in our umbilicus region, for example, around your umbilical cord. And then we also have nociceptors located in our organs. So this might be in the walls of our cecum or our appendix. Those come together and they actually are paired sensory axons that travel up to the same segment of the spinal cord, so they enter through the same spinal nerve. Now, occasionally in the body, if there's pain detected in the appendix area and there's nothing going on the skin, whenever they travel up together through the spinal nerve, they may activate the other one. So we might have our body interpreting that as the skin hurts. So this is called referred pain. This is when our body, our cerebral cortex, is not able to actually accurately locate the source of that pain. Now, when this happens, the signals from our viscera or our gut are perceived as originating from our skin or our muscle instead. This is normally because the sensory neurons for the somatic and the visceral are running side by side to the same spinal cord area, and the cortex is just unable to determine the true source of that pain. This is a map of some of those areas of referred pain. If your liver hurts, that may be misinterpreted as your shoulder. If your appendix hurts, misinterpreted as the umbilical region. stomach, front of your chest, your heart, your pectoral region, your arm, your ureter might be up your sides, and the kidney might be the entire lower abdomen. Now, with referred pain, we do see this with clinical relevance in one big instance, heart attacks. Have you ever heard of someone's chest hurting or their arm hurting as a sign of a heart attack? That's because the innervation coming from your heart is going to be going side by side with the sensory input coming from those skin regions. They're all going to T1 to T5. So they get paired up, and whenever that information comes to the brain, it can't tell if it's the heart, if it's the skin, so it just refers that to the skin, because that is on the conscious level, the somatic. There's also something called phantom pain. Now, phantom pain is when we have all of those sensory nerves coming back from a limb, but then the limb is amputated. So if your foot is amputated, all of those neurons, all of those nerves bringing in input from all the toes, the bottom of the foot, there's a lot of information coming in, but now there's nothing coming. So what can happen is that sensory nerve begins to have nothingness signal as pain. So you feel like your limb is clenched and it hurts and you can't do anything about it because the limb is gone. And what we've been talking about so far has been those general senses, our touch, our pressure, our pain. And now we're going to go and look at the special senses. These are all going to be located in your head. These are specialized organs that are very complex. They start with you smell coming from your nose organ. Taste is from your tongue. Hearing is from your ears. And then equilibrium is also from those ears. And sight comes from your eyes. Now, I've already completed the videos for smell, taste, hearing, equilibrium, and those are going to be posted on Blackboard. So you can go ahead and watch those at your leisure. And we're going to go straight in and talk about sight. After that, we'll be done for the night. Your eyes are very large and full of sensory receptors. They contain 70% of the body's sensory receptors. And half of the cerebral cortex is being used to process that visual information as it comes in, to do that interpretation and understanding of what it sees. And we also have structures called visual accessory structures. These are structures that aren't directly related to our ability to see, but they do play a role in the health of our eyes and keeping them functional. These include eyebrows, the leading theory being they prevent sweat from entering your eye. Eyelids, they can cover and protect your eye and close if you're going to have a bug fly into them, for example. Eyelashes help protect the eye, and if they are touched, you actually initiate blinking from them as well. And the conjunctiva is a transparent lining of the eye and the lid surface. So we're going to actually line the inner side of our eyelid so that whenever we close our eyes, we're not rubbing dry skin on our eyeball. Now your eyes are able to move because there's nothing internal producing the movement of an eyeball. It's all from the outside. So underneath my eyelids, deep to my skin, you're going to be able to see that muscles are able to pull the eye in any direction. So whenever your eyes go up, your superior rectus muscles on the top of your eyeball contracted and pulled the eyeball up. When you look down, your inferior rectus pulled your eyes down. When you look medially, that's a little harder. And when you look laterally, we'll do that with one, you go towards the outside. There's also two additional muscles called oblique muscles, and they are able to be a superior oblique that leads you medially and up, and an inferior oblique that's able to kind of rotate. We have a couple of glands around the eye. The big one is going to be our lacrimal glands. There's one on each side. They're on the lateral side of each eyeball. Now your lacrimal gland is going to be producing a fluid that will collect and drain and wash the eye. Whenever you're blinking, all you're doing is as you close and open your eye, you're going to push that fluid produced by the lacrimal gland over the eyeball. Now, if you have dry eye and your eye is very irritated, you're not producing enough of that lacrimal gland fluid. We're going to use this to moisten and lubricate the eye surface, and it also helps by having some antibodies that help destroy and kill bacteria, because this is a moist, warm area, and if you've ever had pink eye, you know what it's like whenever you get that infection. Now the lacrimal gland is going to produce all of its secretions, and they're going to wash across the eye and drain away into the nose. Some other eye structures that you have are the cornea, which is a transparent layer covering the front of the eye. If you use contact lens, you put them on your cornea. Now the sclera is going to be the white of the eye. It's everywhere from the transparent cornea out. So the majority of your eyeball is surrounded by that sclera. It's a tough fibrous layer and it's white. It's to the sclera that your muscles are going to attach. Now this picture where you see the cone-shaped bulge of the cornea, that's whenever your cornea begins to thin, and as it fills with fluid, it actually starts to bulge outward in a cone shape. Now some more structures that we have include the choroid. The choroid is going to be a layer of the eyeball just underneath the white sclera. So we see it right here in red. Just underneath the area of your iris, we have what is called the ciliary body. The ciliary body is going to be both producing humor and using ligaments to hold our lens in place. The colored portion of your eye is called the iris. At its very center is a small hole called a pupil. Now your iris has the ability to change the size of the pupil. This is going to allow you to have a constricted pupil, which limits the amount of light that come in, only a small amount. So if you're in a very, very bright room, there's a lot of sunlight coming in, you constrict that pupil to limit the amount. There's small little sphincter muscles that can contract. Now, on the other hand, if you're in the dark, you want to bring in as much light as you possibly can. So those eyes, pupils have become dilated and become very large to let as much light in as possible. Here's a picture of the eyeball. With this one, we're able to see very well the sclera, the choroid, and then the next layer is going to be the retina. Inside of the cavity, we're going to fill it with vitreous humor. And we see our lens right here, which is held in place by the suspensory ligaments of the ciliary body. Here's the iris with the pupil, the opening in the middle, and our cornea. Now, where we actually have sight from, it's from the retina, also called the internal neural tunic. Now, the retina is a pretty thin layer, but it's very important because it contains the photoreceptors called rods and cones. Now, these are all just layered in, and they're bringing in all of that, all the light that comes into the eyeball. It reaches these photoreceptors. When it reaches the rods, which are very numerous and highly sensitive, those are going to be activated even by dim light. The periphery of your retina contains a lot of rods, and these are going to be very useful for seeing at night, for example. Anytime that we're going to see your periphery is not as sharp as is where you're focusing on, so all of that periphery is going to be those rods at work normally. Your cones are activated by the high intensity light. They are where you get your color vision from. The sharper the vision when in bright light. If we're in very dim light or dark light, you're not going to be able to see very sharply. You're basically just using your rods. So if someone can only see in black and white, they're pretty much just using those rods. Their cones aren't able to function properly. Now in this picture on the side, the cones are in blue, and they're much larger than those small rods in white that only come about halfway up. This is a view that if you've ever gone to have your eyes checked, that the doctor had. He looked into your eyes, in your pupil, and what he saw was the back of your eyeball. Now on the back of your eyeball, you're going to be able to see the retina, and there's a small spot called the fovea centralis. Now this is an area where the center of your vision is, and there's a highest concentration of cones. So if you have very sharp vision, it's because you're focusing all of the light coming in at the fovea centralis. Now over here on the side is the optic nerve. This is the nerve, and also where the nerves leave and enter the eye, and also where those blood vessels originate that feed and nourish the eye cells. Now, as your rods and cones become activated, they are going to become polarized. If you remember, we talked about ions way back in like chapter 2. Well, those guys are used here as well. And once those cells become activated, they begin a chain reaction. They're going to send that potential down the axon, which will send a neural signal to the brain, which interprets as sight. Based on which rods and which cones are activated, what color rods or cones, and the amount of them, how well they're activated, it interprets all of that as our vision. Now, if you're able to focus and have sharp vision, good for you. For the most part, for example, my eyes are good, but if I'm trying to look at something at a great distance, I am unable to properly position my lens to see it sharply. So instead, I see it as kind of blurry whenever it's really far away. Something that can happen with our eyes is cataracts. This is when, as you get older, your lenses start to cloud over. Now, in these cases, that can make what normally would be a sharp vision very cloudy, and it gives it almost like a blue pearl-like appearance whenever you look at someone with cataracts. Now, the treatment for cataracts is going to be to actually surgically go in, cut through the cornea, and break the lens into small pieces and vacuum them out. Then use an artificial lens that you surgically insert back into the eye, and it unfolds to the proper size. So there is a video if you want to watch that and see how the surgery actually happens. And you just insert that new lens in and you're good to go. Another condition that can occur with the eyes is called glaucoma. This is when pressure begins to build up in your eye and to the point where it causes damage to your ocular nerve.